All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Priyanka Verma. I work as a clinical project manager at Preferred Medicine, working on developing a test for early detection of breast cancer. In today's talk, I'll briefly review on biomarkers and speak about the advantages of early detection, as well as things to consider when designing a clinical trial for the same. This brings us to the first question: what exactly is a biomarker? So, how do we define it? FDA NIH biomarker working group says that a biomarker is a defined characteristic or a biological observation intended to predict and or confirm the presence of pathogenic process or response to a therapeutic intervention. It can also be a molecule present in blood, tissue, cerebrospinal fluid, and other bodily fluids like ascitic fluid, urine, etc. Or it can be a symptom and sign observed on history and clinical examination, radiological imaging, or a finding in the lab results. It can also be a genetic signature or fingerprint or some mutations indicating the pathogenesis. So, any of these categories, biomarkers can be found. The same working group classified biomarkers into various categories like diagnostic, prognostic, predictive, safety biomarkers, monitoring biomarkers, response biomarkers, risk biomarkers, and endpoint biomarkers. So, what exactly is a diagnostic biomarker? A diagnostic biomarker is used to detect or confirm the presence of disease or the condition of interest, or to identify individuals with a subtype of the disease. For example, sweat chloride to confirm cystic fibrosis, HbA1c for type 2 diabetes mellitus, repeated blood pressure readings to confirm essential hypertension, gene expression profiling can be used as a diagnostic biomarker to segregate patients with diffuse large B cell lymphoma into subgroups with different tumor cell of origin signatures. So it can be any of those examples and many more. What is a monitoring biomarker? A monitoring biomarker is one which is measured repeatedly for assessing the status of a disease or medical condition or for evidence of exposure to the medical product or an environmental agent. Again, we can see the example of prostate specific antigen, which is used to assess the disease status or the tumor burden in patients with prostate cancer. CA125, which is cancer antigen 125 biomarker, is used to assess the disease status or tumor burden during and after treatment in patients with ovarian cancer. And there are so many others like HCV RNA level, INR, and PT ratio, etc. What exactly is a response biomarker? That's the fourth category. It is a biomarker which is used to show that a biological response has occurred in an individual who has been exposed to a medical product or an environmental agent. Again, HbA1c can also be used as a biomarker, as a response biomarker to see, if the anti-diabetes drugs, anti-hypoglycemics, or lifestyle changes are actually making a change in the blood sugar of the patient. Or for blood pressure can be used as a response biomarker for antihypertensives, which are being used to treat the hypertension. The next category is predictive biomarkers. Predictive biomarkers are used to identify individuals who are more likely than similar individuals without the biomarker to experience a favorable or unfavorable effect from the exposure to that medical product or to that environmental agent. For example, BRCA1 and 2 mutations, they may be used as predictive biomarkers when evaluating patients with platinum-sensitive ovarian cancer to identify if they are likely to respond to the treatment, which is poly-ADP ribose inhibitors. That's just an example. Mutations in BRCA1 and 2 can also be used as predictive biomarkers for sensitivity to ionizing radiation, because they may impair the function of the gene's protein products in the repair of double-stranded DNA breaks, which are one type of damage caused by the ionizing radiation. So that is another type of biomarker. Prognostic biomarkers are those which are used to identify the likelihood of a clinical event, disease recurrence, or progression in patients who have the disease or medical condition of interest. For example, again, I'll quote BRCA1 and 2 mutations. They may be used as prognostic biomarkers when evaluating women with breast cancer to assess the likelihood of a second breast cancer. Or prostate-specific antigen levels, they can be used as prognostic biomarkers when evaluating patients with prostate cancer during follow-up to assess the likelihood of cancer progression. And then the next one is safety biomarkers. A safety biomarker is measured before or after an exposure to a medical product or the environmental agent to indicate the likelihood, presence, or extent of toxicity as an adverse effect. For example, serum creatinine can be used as a safety biomarker when evaluating patients with impaired kidney function to see if the drug is causing nephrotoxicity. Bilirubin and hepatic aminotransferases can be used as biomarkers, safety biomarkers when evaluating potential hepatotoxicity and so on. What are risk biomarkers? A biomarker that indicates the potential for developing a disease or medical condition in an individual who does not currently have clinically apparent disease is a risk biomarker. For example, again, BRCA1 and 2 mutations, they can also be used as risk biomarkers to identify individuals with a predisposition to develop breast cancer. Or infection with certain human papillomavirus HPV subtypes, they may be used as risk biomarkers to identify individuals with a predisposition to develop cervical cancer. What are endpoint biomarkers? So what is an endpoint? An endpoint is supported by strong mechanistic and or epidemiologic rationale, such that an effect on the surrogate endpoint is expected to be correlated with an endpoint intended to assess the clinical benefit in clinical trials, but it's not yet validated. So endpoints can be used for accelerated approval of drugs and potentially also for approval and clearance of medical devices. In the case of accelerated approval of drugs, post-marketing confirmatory trials are conducted to verify and describe the anticipated effect on the irreversible morbidity or mortality or any other clinical benefit of that particular drug. And there are so many examples like radiographic evidence of tumor shrinkage, that is a response rate, progression-free survival in certain cancer types. They have been considered reasonably likely to predict an improvement in overall survival with certain therapies and have supported accelerated approval of drugs to treat those cancer types. For today's presentation, I'm going to speak more on diagnostic biomarkers. Again, they are classified into 6 categories: conventional, genetic, transcriptomic, epigenetic, proteomic, and metabolomic. This slide is talking about several examples of conventional biomarkers, which are currently known and in application for diagnosing different types of cancers. So like, for instance, gastric cancers, CEA, CA19-9, AFP, CA125, CA72-4, all of those are conventional biomarkers used for gastric cancer. For liver cancer, we have AFP levels. For ovarian cancers, we have CA125 levels. Medullary thyroid cancer, we have calcitonin. CD19 and CD22 are used for B-cell lymphoma and leukemia. Chromogranin A is for neuroendocrine tumor, gastrin for gastrinoma, 5-HIA for carcinoid tumor, PSA for prostate cancer. So these are like conventional biomarkers. What are genetic biomarkers? So genetic biomarkers, they are biomarkers which utilize gene rearrangements or gene expression, fusion genes, or genetic mutations for diagnosis of several cancers, like, for instance, lymphoma and leukemia, which are being applied currently. So with the advent of precision medicine, there has been an increased interest in researching further on genetic biomarkers, utilizing a next generation sequencing technology, which is the NGS technology, and identifying the circulating tumor DNA, which is ctDNA, mutations to the driver genes, transcriptomic biomarkers, epigenetic biomarkers, proteomic and metabolomic biomarkers as a diagnostic tool in oncology. And that brings me to the next category, which is transcriptomic biomarkers. They are those biomarkers which make use of messenger RNA expression, which is called transcriptomics, with the help of RNA sequencing technologies. So they are of immense value in prognostic application, and they are currently also being researched for a prospect on diagnostic capabilities to detect cancer early. I'll quote an example: upregulation of mRNA and protein expression of SEPT9 in tumor tissue in cervical cancer patients was compared to paratumor tissue, and was suggested its potential diagnostic utility was suggested in early detection of cervical cancer in one of the studies. And microRNA is, on the other hand, plays a role in every aspect of cancer cell genesis, growth, invasion, and eventually apoptosis. So, what are microRNAs? MicroRNAs are small, non-coding regulatory RNAs with a size of 17 to 25 nucleotides. The microRNA expression profile is being researched via several clinical trials to evaluate its diagnostic and prognostic capabilities in oncology. I'm sorry. So, and this slide is talking about the third category, which is epigenetic biomarkers. So, they basically use DNA methylation, given that hypermethylation is a common biomolecular alteration in the development of cancer. DNA from whole blood, as well as cell free DNA, both of them are used for assessing DNA methylation with array based technologies like methylation specific PCR and pyrosequencing. Methylated BRCA1 and RASF1A genes were seen in breast cancer patients as compared to healthy females in several studies. While proteomic biomarkers are effective in their prognostic ability for certain cancers, metabolomics or biomarkers assessing the altered metabolism it can be of immense utility in early detection and hence improved survival of cancers, given that altered metabolism is a signature characteristic of a cancer cell. That brings me to the last approach, which is also called as multiomics approach. This basically combines the prowess of all the above categories and to deliver a comprehensive assessment of cell dynamics in cancer cells, thereby potentially leading to an early detection of cancer. So, and that brings me to the topic of early detection. What are the methods which are being utilized or researched for early detection? So, as I said, with the advent of new technology in genomic analysis, there has been an unprecedented interest over the last decade in identifying biomarkers through liquid biopsy of all the categories mentioned above to facilitate earlier detection of cancer, preferably before the cancer metastasizes. What is liquid biopsy? Liquid biopsy entails examining body fluids for identifying tumor biomarkers like circulating tumor DNA, mRNA, microRNA, to name a few. Liquid biopsy is a minimally invasive procedure. It is quick and easy to perform. It has very short turnaround times. It provides fresh sample without preservatives, and it often eliminates the need for a potentially invasive biopsy, becoming particularly helpful in highly invasive cancers like non-small cell lung cancer, diagnosing cancer prenatally, pancreatic cancer, where a biopsy is contraindicated, or if there is an inadequate sample. So it becomes of immense utility there. What is ctDNA? As I mentioned, it was circulating tumor DNA. Those biomarkers are released from all tumor cells and is a wealth of information on the inter and intra-tumor heterogeneity, which in turn impacts the tumor staging, tumor metastasis, vascularization, amongst others. Cell-free DNA or cfDNA, on the other hand, is fragmented DNA of the cancer cells. It can be released either passively after a pathologic process like apoptosis or cell necrosis, or actively from a living cell. So now another category of genetic biomarker, as I mentioned, which is increasingly getting attention to its diagnostic capability, is cell-free microRNA. It was first discovered in cell-free blood plasma and serum. It is mostly found encapsulated in extracellular vesicles like exosomes or microparticles. And then the tumor-derived exosomes and circulating tumor cells both can provide supplemental information about the whole tumor, as well as serve as predictive genetic fingerprints, being the source for several molecular biomarkers like DNA, RNA, microRNA, and proteins. So, what exactly is the utility if we, detect cancer early? The biomarkers which identify the cancer early can play a very critical role when the results of the diagnostic profiling can be used as prognostic and predictive biomarkers, thereby improving the survival rates. So, as well as following up for minimal residual disease. This will also greatly assist in personalizing the patient care by delivering the targeted therapy, or sometimes, likelihood of surgery being the only management needed to remove the cancer. So, but there are several drawbacks, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And precision oncology is coming up with, ways to overcome those drawbacks. So while there are several benefits to utilizing biomarkers for early detection, there are certain limitations too, which have to be kept in mind, including limited sensitivity, and limited specificity, sometimes cellular-derived contamination, which can, lead to a falsely increased expression of the biomarker, which can again lead to overdiagnosis with added emotional and psychological and financial burden on the patient and the healthcare system. So, precision medicine, as I was talking about, this looks to correct these drawbacks with a more laser sharp focus on profiling the cancer through a detailed genomic analysis, sometimes using machine learning algorithms and so on. The low concentration of RNA, circulating microRNAs, was countered by introducing high throughput platforms based on amplification or hybridization principles to analyze a wider spectrum of microRNAs in an assay using RNA sequencing. And that increasingly became the preferred method to do so. But the drawbacks for that was that it is expensive, it requires bioinformatics support, and it has a potential for introducing bias because of multi-step library preparation process. So what things we should consider when we are designing a trial to test a biomarker, which can be a potential application when doing eventually in clinical practice. So to design a clinical trial to test a biomarker as a screening tool for early detection, we should definitely give consideration to the following points. We should look at whether the cancer in question is prevalent in the demographic intended to diagnose the cancer. So the cancer should have a recognizable early stage. In the absence of treatment, the cancer would progress to advanced stage, because there are several cancers which still always stay in the benign stage. It doesn't make sense to go for a trial which is going to put in so much money on the trial, and then eventually it's not going to be marketable. There is a safe and effective treatment available to treat the cancer in question. And eventually, the test being developed should be cost effective and not cause a huge burden on the healthcare system. So, those are a few things which we need to consider when we design a clinical trial to test a biomarker, very briefly. So, steps, what are the steps forward? The accuracy of the biomarker test evaluating the presence of cancer, can be improved by being mindful of the demographic the test intends to diagnose and the prevalence of that cancer in that demographic. This will positively impact the positive predictive value and the negative predictive value of the biomarker test in question. Positive predictive and negative predictive value, as we all know, is dependent on the prevalence of the cancer. So the aim of a clinical trial we are trying to build is to have a test with a low false positive result, which will lead to unnecessary intervention in the medical management, as well as negative psychological and emotional impact and financial impact on the patients and their families. So the clinical trials which are testing, which are being designed to test and validate the new and upcoming biomarkers in question should preferably be multi-center trials. They should be prospective trials, and they should show a concordant result across all cohorts involving all the clinical sites. And then, to conclude, definitely the biomarkers, genetic biomarkers, which are being researched via novel genomic approach like NGS and sequencing technologies and whatnot, they definitely are a boon in making, and they can serve as a critical platform as a diagnostic tool. But it does come with its very own challenges in diagnosing cancer with an unknown primary source of origin. So, but the advanced genomic analysis, they can be supplemented by cancer risk profiling, and they can be guided by diagnostic profile results to deliver an improved performance of the test in clinical practice in early detection of cancer. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for attending the talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priyanka. This was a really amazing presentation, and we enjoyed learning more about the biomarkers and the early detection of diseases. And we actually have multiple questions from the audience for you. We can start with the first question. So Isabella is asking, how can we evaluate the biomarkers for early detection?
Well, it really depends on the biomarker in question and the cancer in question. So if you are looking at, for instance, microRNA, again, several companies are using machine learning algorithms. They have a full database of microRNAs which are already being researched. And then they compare, the biomarker which they are analyzing, that particular biomarker in, for instance, they have several samples, blood samples from the patients who have participated in those trials, and they are looking at those microRNAs. They are basically looking at and comparing it with the database which they have. And every company has several specific algorithms, as I mentioned, or machine learning algorithms. And they basically compare that with those algorithms and see if they are, seeing a overexpression or an underexpression of some particular microRNAs in, cancer patients versus healthy cohorts. So that would help them to see if that particular biomarker is actually can be of diagnostic utility for that particular cancer. And that, I think that holds true for most of the liquid biopsy. If that helps answer.
Yeah, that very helps answer the question. And it also applies to the second question, Ronaldo's asking, how can you detect cancer early? So your answer also explains that very much.
Yeah, actually, exactly. And, again, it depends on the particular cancer. Like, for instance, let's speak about breast cancer. So right now, the current recommendation is to have annual screening mammograms, and they are pretty effective. So, in detecting cancer early, that's why we are recommending, at 40 years of age, you're asking the regular demographic women who are more than 40 years of age or at 40 years of age, they are being asked to, consider annual screening mammograms, or sometimes it is 45. It really depends on which task force that particular practice is following. So it's definitely good, but then mammograms have their own drawbacks, because sometimes for instance, in women with dense breast, they are not really screening mammograms are not able to identify very correctly where is the location of the tumor, and that leads to the patient going for several confirmatory tests like the diagnostic mammogram, ultrasound, MRI, and then eventually they will do a biopsy to confirm it, the staging, etc. And treat the patient if the cancer is present. But then so many tests, so if we go for biomarkers, and if they have a particular biomarker which can be, has been researched and has been validated to be of diagnostic utility or to be, useful to early detect breast cancer, all you would need is literally a blood test. But of course, that has not yet been, it's still being researched, but that's the way forward. So that's why we have to think about all the points which I talked about, how to design the trials. And this is just an example, but it holds true for most of the cancers, which are being researched currently, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling us those information about cancer. And actually, most people are interested in this topic. And if we want to specify the phases of biomarker development in the early detection of cancer, like the headlines of the phases, like how can you specify?
Well, to be very honest, it basically follows, first of all, it basically follows the regular phases, which clinical trial goes through. So let's talk about liquid biopsy. So there are so many companies, which are doing liquid biopsy and propagating it, like say, for utilizing ctDNA or researching on mRNA, etc., for diagnostics. So what are the phases of development? Well, to be very honest, it's a good question. I can definitely come back to it later. But basically, what happens is that, as I mentioned, you're getting the blood drawn. You're testing the biomarker, and it is all done by machine learning. So it's a lot of artificial intelligence platforms, as I mentioned, in RNA sequencing as well. They are using a lot of high throughput platforms to amplify and hybridize the very, because these biomarkers are present in very low concentration. So there isn't any exact phase which goes through, but this is basically the process which happens, is that, you get the sample, you centrifuge it, you process it, etc. And then, you look at both the serum and the plasma and compare from the database which you already have for those biomarkers. For instance, if you're looking at cfDNA and you look at the database, if you're looking at microRNA, you look at the database, and then obviously you will have your own set of samples. So you can also have your own database, and then you will compare it. And every company has their own algorithms, as I mentioned, and they will run those data through the algorithms and see if, as I mentioned, they will plot the expression. So if the area under the curve is higher or lower, but it will signify overexpression, underexpression, and that would help them understand whether this marker is significantly present. And in early stages, they will compare it with the stages, with the clinical findings of those patients, and then see if it is actually present in patients. Again, usually they have comparative cohorts. So volunteers, they will look at if some of the volunteers might have BRCA mutations, they might be under high risk categories. For instance, let's talk about breast cancer. So, volunteer cohort might have, even though they don't have the cancer right then, they might be having mutations. They might have a very strong family history. Then they will look at the expression profiling in the blood of those volunteers as well, and look at how it is working. If there is overexpression in those, or if it is moving towards overexpression. So those are very, it's not yet proven, so nobody knows, but that is the way forward. That's what they are trying to, look at, if that is going to be present or not. And if they can see that particular, so for instance, just pick microRNA A. If microRNA A or cell-free DNA A is present in both very high risk volunteer and in stage 0 of a breast cancer patient, then they can, compare and contrast and see that, okay, this particular microRNA or this particular cell-free DNA is actually, being expressed in these patients or volunteers who can develop cancers later on. But it's very early to comment on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. This actually takes us to think about the future of blood-based biomarkers for the early detection of breast cancer. So do you have any prospects regarding the future of that?
Yeah, I think the future is very bright. That's why I'm working in a company where they are actually trying to bring. I'm very hopeful and optimistic. We already have several companies in the market, like for instance, Gallery, which is already talking about, and I think I read an article yesterday on another company, Exact Biosciences. They are utilizing methylated DNA for multiple cancer early detection. So it's this the market is a buzz. They are teaming up with all the top oncologists and across the world, and everybody is there are so many markers to explore. Some of them are utilizing circulating tumor DNA. Some of them are utilizing cell-free DNA. As I mentioned, this company is utilizing methylated DNA. So some of them are looking at mRNA. Actually, in urine of there was a study in Singapore, I think, if I'm not mistaken, where they were actually looking at urine of patients, and looking at the mRNA expression in the urine of those patients, if they can help detect lung cancer or breast cancer, some multiple cancer detection. So the way forward is definitely they are looking at several cancers which have an early phase. As I mentioned, that cancer should have an early recognizable phase. And then they are looking at, so I think the way forward is really bright. And hopefully we should be, it's a potential prognostic and diagnostic implication.
Yeah, that's actually fantastic. Like you're trying to monitor the tumor from every single aspect. Even people wouldn't expect that you can monitor markers in the urine to predict like lung cancer, and that's very informative. And actually, there is a question that's very interesting. They're asking about the conditions that raise the tumor markers. Like, are there conditions or things like food or other drugs that can raise tumor cancers, other factors?
Yes, definitely. That's exactly. So that's how the conventional biomarkers were developed, right? I mean, that this is how they look at, which condition. That is the premise of all of this research. Which condition is raising which tumor marker? That's what we are trying to find. So, if you look at conventional biomarkers, we already know that prostate specific antigen, we know that it isn't currently in application. So if the patient is developing prostate cancer, we know that prostate specific antigen, we can monitor those levels. And that is what we are trying to, as far as the genetic biomarkers are concerned, that's what they are trying to look at. Which condition is raising which tumor marker? That's what they are researching on. Which ctDNA is being raised, what kind of ctDNA, and there are several, what kind of microRNA. There are several loci, they are all defined by the genetic loci. So that's what they're trying to look at, which condition is raising which tumor marker. And there is an overlap as well. So for instance, like if you will look at BRCA1 and 2, there are conditions like Lynch syndrome, which will have multiple cancers coming together. So it's very difficult to say that, oh, okay, this BRCA1, and as I mentioned, BRCA1 and 2 is used for ovarian cancer as well as breast cancer. So, for prognostic and diagnostic application. So, not only is that, that particular cancer is raising it, but also there is an overlap. So it's not like, straight boxes where we can fit that this tumor, for instance, AFP is used in gastric and liver cancer. So yeah, if that helps.
Yeah,
Good
that's
question.
very
Yeah.
interesting. And I've actually thought about something like, does exercise, like the patient that, like himself, does exercise, diet, or the patient being alcoholic or anything that's different from other patients can affect the levels of the expression of some
Right.
biomarkers?
Exactly. That's a very good question. And when we design, and that's where, clinical research becomes very, very important, and how you're designing the trial and what factors you're looking at. So when you're designing a trial, you have to pay attention to the comorbidities. You have to pay attention to the current con meds, what patients, especially if you're trying to develop a diagnostic test, because several medications can alter the expression profiling. That can also happen. So, you have to design the trial like so. You have to see, and then all of this data is analyzed statistically. A test will only come out, that, okay, this test is good for early detection of this XYZ cancer only when all of those conditions have already been shown to be statistically significant given the comorbidities. So this is a very broad and comprehensive question. Like, I cannot say that, okay, this condition is going to, definitely comorbidities affect the profiling, not only genetic profiling, but also the overall status of the patient, the clinical status. So it is going to have an effect on the biomarkers. That's how we will look at the data collected in the clinical trials. We look at clinical data. We don't just look at the lab data, but we also correlate it with the clinical data, and as I mentioned, the medical history and, current medications, and then look at if this, what is the application and what is the utility for this increased profiling of that particular biomarker.
Yeah, that's actually very crucial to be able to personalize the tests for to suit every patient. Or also countries can differ, genetics, people from different races, it can also affect your diagnosis. So this takes us to another actually point. How about the drawbacks of these tests, and are there any complications happen due to those tests?
So that's a good thing about liquid biopsy. As of now, what we know is that if we are talking about liquid biopsy, that there's literally very, very limited particular drawback as far as the test is concerned. Literally, it's like most of the tests are like, for instance, as I mentioned, urinary test. You're literally collecting urine of the patient. Like, it's not going to cause them any harm. Or, ctDNA, they are testing out of blood, or as I mentioned, so many bodily fluids, society fluid. Just basically, just even if you're collecting blood, it's the limitation is the particular process limitation is very less. But having said that, as I mentioned in my slides, the limitation of the tests are definitely there. These tests have limited sensitivity, they have limited specificity, which basically means that we are trying to rule out, as I mentioned, we don't want a test with a high false positive. So we are trying to rule out people who are actually testing false positive or false negative. So we want a higher sensitivity and we want a higher specificity. And all of this can be attained by these novel genomic analysis methods, because they are basically extremely advanced genomic analysis. They do a very detailed and thorough analysis. They have very, as I mentioned, laser sharp focus. So that is going to overcome those drawbacks. But then there are other drawbacks, like it's expensive, it requires bioinformatics support, and so on and so forth. So definitely, people are interested in getting these tests analyzed. They are getting investors. All these companies are trying to bring up a test for several cancers. So quite hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's quite helpful. And do you think, Dr. Priyanka, that this can help with the chemo prevention, the early detection of cancer can help to prevent patients from taking chemotherapy, maybe?
Yes, so it's not like, oh, you've got an early detection, so nothing is, again, it depends on the cancer per se, but as a rule, we all want the cancer to be caught early, because before it metastasizes, because the moment it metastasizes, more often than not, you do need chemotherapy, you do need advanced treatments. Several multiple treatment modalities are combined, surgery plus chemotherapy plus radiation therapy and whatnot, most of the cancers, if not all. So we definitely want to catch the cancer early, so that you can deliver a targeted therapy to the patient. So if you can catch the cancer early, first of all, the prognosis improves significantly, the survival improves significantly, and the acceptance rate of the treatment gets better if it is at an earlier stage as compared to advanced stage, as we all know. So it is always good to catch the cancer early, but there is not a particular percentage which we can say that, okay, this percentage, that data is definitely not available, and it is going to vary from cancer to cancer. But as a general rule, we can definitely say that early detection is always better. And it is the call of the hour. Actually, everybody is working towards it.
Yeah, that's quite understandable. And do you have any suggestions for people who want to start their careers working in biomarkers discovery research? And if there are other fields other than cancer, you think that this field really needs people to, develop more diagnostic tools? What do you think other fields are important as cancer?
Other than cancer, you're saying what diagnostic? I think we all want to eradicate all kinds of diseases. That's the idea. But other than cancers, I think the diagnostic utility of biomarkers I think it's going to be used in and researched in, but I'm not really, I cannot quote a source or anything. But I think all the I would like for the biomarkers to, bring up some sort of treatment or diagnostic benefit in all the diseases like, diabetes or hypertension or, which is very commonly afflicting everybody other than oncology, but mostly it is oncology where they are working on. I do know that even liver cancer, they have, clinical trials which have been done based out of mRNA. But other than oncology, yes, why not? I'm not the best person to be answering on on behalf of that, but for sure we would definitely like to have more research on that as well, so that we can catch it early, and mainly because we can treat it early and completely treat it. I think that is the call of the hour for the rest of the diseases other than oncology.
Yeah, that's really a great message. And I'm very happy that you mentioned diabetes mellitus, because people actually die from having hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia specifically. I was actually working with people who are working with artificial intelligence and deep learning to develop an algorithm to predict like the hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia at once in like a lab on a chip that injected at patients' arms or like whatever it's suitable place, so we can predict that, and this actually can save lots of lives. So thank you so much, Dr. Priyanka, for your really interesting presentation.
Thank you so much for
really
inviting me.
So much hope.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much.